Hello and welcome. You're welcome to comment your city and the time below. I always enjoy reading them. If you find these stories interesting, please consider subscribing. Let's start tonight's story. I arrived at Kaskak Regional Airfield on a Tuesday afternoon in late October, when the Alaskan sky had already committed to its long descent into winter darkness. The flight from Anchorage had been turbulent, the kind where other passengers grip armrests and pray quietly, but I'd barely noticed. I was too busy calculating how many weeks of work it would take to cover my medical bills and first and last on a new apartment back in Seattle. The warehouse accident had left me with a herniated disc and a workers' comp settlement that wouldn't cover half of what I owed. The breakup with Jenna had left me sleeping on my cousin's couch, watching my savings evaporate like morning fog. So when I saw the job listing, shuttle driver needed, Kaskak Regional Airfield, Alaska, 4,200 month plus housing, minimal experience required, I applied within minutes. The fact that they hired me over a phone call lasting less than 3 minutes should have been my first warning. The airfield sat in a depression between low mountains that disappeared into perpetual fog, surrounded by black spruce forest and frozen marshland that cracked and groaned even in stillness. The runway stretched impossibly straight through the tundra, flanked by lights that burned too bright against the gray sky, like they were fighting something the human eye couldn't quite see. I noticed that immediately, the quality of the light. It didn't illuminate so much as push back. The terminal itself was small, a prefabricated structure with peeling paint and windows that reflected clouds in strange, doubled images. Inside, maybe a dozen people moved through the space with the practiced efficiency of those who've learned not to waste motion. The walls were covered in bulletin boards, employee notices, and safety regulations. But as I walked past, I saw something else. Rectangular shadows on the painted concrete, perfect outlines where papers had once been taped up and recently removed. Lots of them, I counted, at least 15 on one wall alone, all roughly the same size, arranged in neat rows like a memorial. Missing person flyers, I thought, though I couldn't say why I was so certain. Outside, visible through the smudged glass, sat a single shuttle bus in the employee lot. It was older than I expected, a 20-passenger Ford with fading white paint and the airfield's logo barely visible on the side. But the engine was running. I could see the faint shimmer of exhaust in the cold air, as if someone had just parked it, or as if it never fully shut off. Noah Mercer? I turned to find a woman in her late 40s studying me with the kind of exhaustion that lives in the bones. She wore a heavy parka over a uniform polo, and her name tag read M. Voss, Operations Supervisor. Her handshake was brief and cold. "That's me. Mara. We spoke on the phone." She gestured toward a hallway. "Come on, I'll get you oriented before your first shift." Her office was small and overheated, the kind of space that smells like burnt coffee and recycled air. She sat me down and slid a folder across the desk. Standard paperwork, W-4, direct deposit authorization, and emergency contact forms. I filled them out while she typed something on an old desktop computer, the keys clicking with the rhythm of someone who's done this many times before. "You'll be driving the shuttle between the terminal, staff housing, and the cargo facilities," she said without looking up. 12-hour shifts, 6 on, 2 off. You'll have the overnight rotation, 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. Housing is cabin 7, about a mile down the access road. Shared kitchen, private bedroom, Wi-Fi is functional most nights. Most nights, weather interferes. She pulled a laminated card from her desk drawer and set it in front of me. "This is important. Read it before your first night run. Memorize it." The card was slightly yellowed, the lamination bubbling at the corners from age. At the top, in bold letters, shuttle route. Rules. Read before your first night run. I picked it up, expecting the usual. Watch for ice, don't leave the engine running unattended, yield to emergency vehicles. Instead, I read, Rule 1. Never stop on the access road between the 3rd and 4th reflective mile markers, no matter what you see. Rule 2. If a passenger boards without luggage and says, I missed the last flight, do not ask questions. Take them to Hangar B and do not watch them exit. Rule 3. If you see runway lights blinking in an alternating pattern, left, right, left, turn the bus interior lights off and keep driving. Rule 4. Never open the bus door for anyone waving from the tree line. Rule 5. If the terminal radio starts playing a lullaby, park the bus, keep both hands on the wheel, and do not look into the rearview mirror. I read it twice, waiting for the punchline. When I looked up, Mara was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite parse, something between sympathy and appraisal. Is this some kind of hazing thing? I tried to keep my voice light, like I was in on the joke. No. These rules they're not about weather or wildlife or... Follow them, Mara interrupted, or you won't make it to spring. The heating unit kicked on with a rattle that made me flinch. Mara didn't blink. I don't understand. You will. She stood, indicating the meeting was over. Your first shift starts at 8 tonight. Keys are in the bus. Don't lose the laminated card. And Noah? She waited until I met her eyes. The rules exist for a reason. Every single one of them was written because someone before you learned the hard way why it was necessary. I wanted to ask what she meant. I wanted to ask why she looked at me like I was already a ghost. Instead, I took the card, felt its strange weight in my palm, and nodded. Walking back through the terminal, I passed a janitor mopping the floor near the windows. He was humming something under his breath, low and tuneless. As I approached, he stopped mid-stroke and looked at me, really looked at me with the kind of recognition you'd give someone you've been expecting. New driver? He asked. Yeah. Start tonight. He nodded slowly, then returned to mopping, his voice so quiet I almost didn't hear. Keep your eyes forward, that's the trick, just keep your eyes forward. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying with it the smell of pine and something else, something mineral and old, like wet stone. The shuttle bus sat where I'd first seen it, engines still running, windows dark. The driver's seat was empty, but I could swear, just for a second, I saw the impression of someone sitting there, a shadow that held the shape of shoulders and a head before dissolving into ordinary darkness. I checked my phone. 4:47 p.m., 3 hours until my first shift. The sun, what little of it had bothered to show, was already sinking behind the mountains, and the runway lights were beginning their too bright vigil against the gathering dark. I stood in the parking lot, laminated card in my hand, and felt the first whisper of something I couldn't name yet. Not fear exactly, recognition. As if some part of me, some ancient hindbrain instinct, knew I'd made a terrible mistake coming here. But I had nowhere else to go, no other options, and winter was closing in fast. So I walked to cabin 7, unpacked my single duffel bag, and tried not to think about the rules. I tried not to wonder what kind of place needed rules like that. I tried not to notice that the shadows in my cabin seemed darker on one side than the other, or that the window faced the tree line where nothing moved but everything seemed to be waiting. At 7:45 p.m., I put on my jacket, grabbed the laminated card, and walked back to the terminal. The shuttle bus was waiting. The first 2 shifts passed in a fog of routine so mundane it almost convinced me the rules were an elaborate joke. I drove the empty shuttle between the terminal and staff housing 4 times, each night, then made cargo runs to hangars A and C. Never B, I noticed, though I didn't ask why. The roads were well maintained despite the snow, the bus handled smoothly, and the only passengers I encountered were exhausted airport staff who barely looked up from their phones. The access road between the terminal and housing ran straight through a corridor of black spruce, their branches heavy with snow that never seemed to fall. Reflective mile markers punctuated the darkness, simple white posts that caught the headlights every quarter mile. I passed the third marker, then the fourth, and nothing happened. No ghosts, no apparitions, just trees and snow and the reliable rumble of the diesel engine. By the third night, I'd almost relaxed. The air, though, I couldn't get used to the air. During the day, when planes came and went, when cargo crews shouted to each other across the tarmac, the soundscape felt normal enough. But at night, after the last scheduled arrival, silence descended like a physical presence. Not peaceful silence, hungry silence. The kind that swallows footsteps and voices and makes you aware of how small you are, how far from anything resembling civilization. I'd grown up in the Pacific Northwest and spent summers camping in the Cascades. I knew the wilderness was quiet. This was different. This was the quiet of a predator holding its breath. On my third night, around 2:30 in the morning, I was making the housing run when I saw it. The headlights caught movement first, a vertical shape in the road ahead, too tall to be an animal, too still to be alive. I eased off the accelerator, squinting through the windshield. The shape resolved into a person standing directly in my lane about 40 yards ahead, facing the bus. My foot moved toward the brake instinctively. Then my eyes flicked to the side of the road and found the reflective markers glowing in the peripheral wash of the headlights. Third marker behind me. Fourth marker ahead. I was in the zone, the forbidden zone. Rule 1 echoed in my memory. Never stop on the access road between the third and fourth reflective mile markers, no matter what you see. My foot hovered between brake and accelerator. The figure didn't move. It stood perfectly centered in the lane, and as I got closer, I could make out more details. Human-shaped, average height, wearing what looked like dark clothing. No reflective gear, no flashlight, no visible breath clouded the air despite temperatures well below freezing. 20 yards. I could see it was facing me, but where a face should have been, there was only a pale oval. Not covered, I would have seen fabric or a mask, just smooth. Featureless, like looking at someone through severely frosted glass. 10 yards. My hands tightened on the wheel. Every instinct screamed to stop, to help, to check if this person needed assistance. People died in cold like this. Hypothermia could make you confused, make you stand in roads, or make you freeze to death while doing inexplicable things. But the rule said never stop, no matter what you see. I pressed the accelerator. The figure didn't move aside, didn't flinch, didn't react at all to the bus bearing down on it, 5 yards. At the last possible second, the figure slid sideways, not stepped, slid, like it was on rails or being pulled by invisible strings. It moved perpendicular to the road, impossibly smooth, keeping its face turned toward the bus the entire time. I passed within inches. There was no impact, but the bus shuddered, not from hitting something. This was different, a vibration that came from underneath, from below the chassis, like something had brushed the undercarriage with long, dragging fingers. The steering wheel trembled in my grip. The overhead lights flickered once, twice. Then it stopped. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't slow down. I drove past the fourth marker and kept going until the lights of the staff housing cabins appeared, through the trees, warm and impossibly welcoming. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely put the bus in park. I sat there for a full minute, engine running, trying to convince myself I'd seen a shadow, a trick of the headlights, an optical illusion caused by blowing snow and exhaustion. The rational explanations lined up in my mind, neat and organized and utterly unconvincing. The pale oval where a face should have been, the sideways slide, the brush of something beneath the bus. When I finally stepped out, my legs felt weak. The night air hit my face like a slap, and I realized I was sweating despite the cold. Two staff members exited the cabin and walked toward me. A maintenance tech named Luis and someone from the tower I'd seen but never met. Luis nodded at me. "How's the run?" "Fine," I lied. "Did you stop?" The question landed like a physical blow. Luis asked it casually, like he was asking about the weather, but his shoulders were tense, his eyes searching my face. "No," I said, "I didn't stop." His shoulders dropped half an inch. He exhaled, vapor curling from his mouth. "Good. That's good." He walked past me to the cabin, but the other person, a woman with gray streaks in her dark hair, lingered. She looked at the bus, then at me. "You saw something, though." It wasn't a question. I didn't answer. She nodded like I'd confirmed something. "Gets easier," she said. "Not better, just easier." Then she followed Luis inside, leaving me standing in the snow, staring at the shuttle bus. The headlights were still on, illuminating the empty road that led back to the terminal, back through the space between the third and fourth markers. I walked around the bus, inspecting the undercarriage with my phone's flashlight. No damage, no debris, nothing unusual. But when I crouched near the rear axle, I saw something that made my breath catch. Scratches in the frost coating the metal components, long scratches parallel like something with fingers had, reached up and dragged them along the underside of the bus as it passed overhead. The frost was already melting from my breath, the evidence disappearing even as I stared at it. I stood up too fast, dizzy, and returned to the driver's seat. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. I made 2 more runs, both without incident, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched from the tree line, that the darkness between the trunks was deeper than it should be, that the silence was listening. When my shift ended at 8 a.m., the morning light felt like a reprieve. Mara was in her office when I returned the keys. "Any issues?" she asked without looking up from her computer. I almost said no, almost swallowed it down and pretended everything was normal. Instead, I asked, what was I supposed to see between the third and fourth markers? Her fingers stopped typing. She looked at me for a long moment. "You followed the rule?" "Yes." "Then it doesn't matter what you saw. It matters that you kept driving." "Mara, go get some sleep, Noah." She returned to her typing. "You've got another shift tonight." I left the office, walked through the terminal, and caught a glimpse of myself in the window glass. I looked pale, tired, but there was something else. A tightness around my eyes, a set to my jaw that hadn't been there 3 days ago. I looked like someone who'd seen something impossible and was still trying to pretend the world made sense. Outside, the morning was gray and cold. A small plane taxied on the runway, normal and routine. Somewhere a radio played classic rock. A baggage cart rumbled past. Everything looked ordinary. But as I walked to my cabin, I found myself checking the tree line, watching for movement, counting my steps between the reflective markers. And when I finally lay down to sleep, I kept seeing that pale oval turning to follow the bus. Kept feeling that shudder as something beneath brushed upward with fingers too long to be human. I didn't sleep well. I didn't sleep at all. Trent Holloway arrived on a Thursday morning flight, all broad shoulders and easy confidence, the kind of guy who treats life like a sport he's winning. He was maybe 25, with the careless posture of someone who's never had to follow a rule he didn't understand. I met him in the terminal break room during my pre-shift coffee, and he introduced himself by slapping my shoulder like we were old friends. "You're the night driver, right? Noah?" He grinned. "Man, I heard this place was remote, but this is something else. Like the end of the world out here." "Close enough," I said. He'd been hired as a baggage handler, part of the seasonal crew that cycled through every few months. Most of them were like him, young, broke, looking for adventure or money or both. They rarely lasted the full season. I'd noticed that trend in the employee records I'd glimpsed in Mara's office. Lots of start dates, very few end dates marked as contract complete. Over the next few days, Trent became a fixture of my shifts. His schedule overlapped with mine. He worked the late cargo flights, handling the freight that came in on unmarked planes that never appeared on the passenger boards. He'd often be finishing up when I was making my cargo runs, and he'd flag me down, asking for rides back to housing to save himself the walk. I usually obliged. Company felt good, even his company, loud and irreverent as it was. He noticed the laminated card on my dashboard during the second ride. "What's that, rules?" He picked it up before I could stop him, reading aloud in a mocking voice. "Never stop between the third and fourth markers." "What, are there landmines?" "Don't open the door for anyone waving from the tree line." "Because that's a thing that happens?" He laughed, the sound too loud in the enclosed space. "This is hazing, man. They're fucking with the new guys." "Maybe," I said, keeping my eyes on the road. "If the radio plays a lullaby, don't look in the mirror." Come on, this is like creepypasta bullshit. I bet you $20 Mara wrote this just to see if you'd actually follow it. I didn't take the bet. Didn't tell him about the figure on the road, about the scratches in the frost, about the way Luis had asked if I'd stopped with the weight of genuine fear in his voice. "Just follow them," I said. "It's not worth testing." "Not worth testing?" Trent leaned back in his seat, still grinning. "Noah, my man, you can't actually believe this stuff. What do you think is gonna happen? A ghost is gonna get me?" "I don't know what'll happen, that's the point." He laughed again, and I let it drop. But Trent had a talent for pushing boundaries, for finding the edges of rules and stepping over them just to prove he could. I saw it in how he worked, taking smoke breaks in unauthorized areas, using equipment without proper checks, and talking back to supervisors with just enough charm to avoid consequences. It was only a matter of time before he pushed the wrong boundary. The incident happened on a Monday night, 11 days into my employment. Trent's shift ran late. Some issue with a cargo manifest that needed sorting. He caught me just as I was heading to the bus for my midnight housing run. "Hey, give me a ride." He jogged up, breath clouding the air. "I'm fucking exhausted." "Sure." He climbed aboard, and I noticed immediately no bag, no backpack, just Trent in his work coveralls, dropping into a seat 3 rows back. As I pulled out of the cargo area, he called out, "Man, I missed the last flight." My foot slipped off the accelerator. Rule 2. If a passenger boards without luggage and says, "I missed the last flight," do not ask questions. Take them to Hangar B and do not watch them exit. "What did you say?" I kept my voice level. "I said I'm beat. Long night." He yawned. "Why?" "Not the same, not exactly." Relief washed through me, followed by anger at myself for the spike of fear. "Nothing, just tired." We drove in silence for a moment, the access road unwinding ahead of us. Then Trent sat forward. "Yo, what's that?" I followed his gaze. In the tree line to our right, barely visible in the wash of the headlights, a figure stood among the spruce. It was waving, a slow, deliberate motion, arm rising and falling like a metronome. "Someone needs help," Trent said, already moving toward the aisle. "Sit down." "Noah, there's someone out there. Sit down." But Trent was already at the door, hand on the lever. "What if they're hurt? What if they're freezing?" He looked back at me. "You can't seriously be following those stupid rules right now. Do not open that door." "Jesus Christ, you're actually paranoid." He shook his head. "I'm not letting someone freeze to death because of a hazing prank." He pulled the lever. The door cracked open with a hiss of compressed air, maybe 6 inches, no more. Immediately, cold poured in. Not a normal cold. This was dense, wet, heavy with the smell of copper and decomposing vegetation. The smell of marshland in late summer, all rot and stagnant water, is impossible in the middle of an Alaskan winter. The bus interior lights flickered. Trent froze, hand still on the lever. What the fuck? Something pressed against the opening from outside. I couldn't see it clearly, the angle was wrong, the darkness too complete, but I saw the door flex inward slightly, as if something was testing it, learning the dimensions of the gap. The pressure was patient, methodical. "Close it," I said quietly. "Close it now." Trent's face had gone white. He stared at the gap, at whatever was pressing from the other side, and for a moment he didn't move. The smell intensified. The lights flickered again, and in the strobe I saw something that might have been fingers. Too long, too many joints, sliding around the edge of the door. "Close it!" Trent slammed the lever back. The door jerked shut, but it didn't seal completely. I could hear the mechanism struggling, metal grinding against resistance. I kept driving. Accelerator pressed to the floor, the bus shuddering as the engine strained. Behind us, through the windows, I saw the tree line ripple. Not from wind. The movement was too organized, too purposeful, something large pacing us just out of sight, keeping parallel to the road, moving between the trunks with liquid grace. "What the fuck was that?" Trent's voice cracked. "What the fuck was that?" I didn't answer. I was too busy trying to keep the bus on the road, trying not to look at the side mirrors where I could see movement in my peripheral vision, shapes that didn't resolve into anything recognizable. The staff housing lights appeared ahead. I'd never been so grateful to see those dim windows, those ordinary cabins. I pulled into the lot and stopped. Trent was out of his seat before the bus fully halted, stumbling toward the exit. The door opened normally this time, and he practically fell down the steps into the snow. "Trent!" But he was already running, boots crunching through the packed snow toward the cabins. I watched him go, watched his dark figure cross the 50 yards between the bus and the nearest building. Halfway there, his footsteps stopped. No stumble, no fall. The crunching just ceased. I stared at the space where he'd been. The snow was undisturbed ahead of where he'd stopped. No tracks, no signs of struggle, just empty white and the dark shapes of the cabins beyond. I waited 5 minutes, engine running, interior lights on. Trent didn't reappear. I checked the housing list the next morning. Trent Holloway's name was still on it, assigned to Cabin 3, Bunk B. But when I walked past the cabin around noon, unable to sleep, I glanced through the window. Bunk B was neatly made, military corners, no wrinkles, no duffel bag, no personal items. His boots, the heavy sorrels he'd been wearing last night, were gone. In the break room that afternoon, I asked Luis if he'd seen Trent. "Who?" Luis didn't look up from his sandwich. "Trent Holloway, new baggage handler, started last week." Luis chewed slowly, thinking. "Don't know that name." "He was working cargo, you must have seen him." "Maybe he quit. People quit all the time." Luis stood, tossing his trash. "This place isn't for everyone." I checked Mara's office later. The employee roster on her wall showed names and assignments, a grid of ongoing contracts. Trent Holloway's name was gone. No cross-out, no notation. Just absent, like it had never been written. That night before my shift, I stood in the terminal bathroom and stared at my reflection. My eyes looked sunken, dark circles spreading. But it was my expression that disturbed me most. The flat effect, the absence of surprise. I was already adapting, already accepting. I pulled out the laminated card and read Rule 4 again. Never open the bus door for anyone waving from the tree line. Trent had opened the door. Trent was gone. And everyone acted as if he'd never existed. I stopped sleeping more than a few hours at a time. When I did sleep, I dreamed of doors opening 6 inches, of patient pressure from the other side, of footsteps stopping mid-stride. I'd wake with the smell of copper and rot in my nostrils, even though my cabin smelled only of pine and heating oil. During my off days, I started searching. The terminal had a small administrative office that doubled as a records room. Filing cabinets dating back to when the airfield first opened in 1987. Mara was rarely there during the day, and the single security camera in the corner had been covered with electrical tape so long ago that the adhesive had yellowed. I started with recent shift logs, working backward. The shuttle division kept meticulous records, driver names, hours, routes, and incidents, but the incidents were coded in language that revealed nothing and everything at once. March 14th. Unauthorized boarding Route 3. The driver complied with protocol, no follow-up required. January 22nd. Roadway obstruction, mile marker 3.5. The driver maintained course, no damage reported. November 8th. Mirror non-compliance event. The driver required medical leave, position filled. I found my own name in the recent entries. Mercer N. A mile marker incident compiled, continued employment approved. The logs went back years. Names appeared once, maybe twice, then vanished. Whole pages had been removed. I could see the torn edges still caught in the binding. Someone had been selective about what history remained visible. In the back of the third filing cabinet, behind folders labeled equipment maintenance and fuel receipts, I found something different. A spiral notebook, the kind students use, wedged so far back it was nearly invisible. The cover was water-stained, the pages warped. The first page, in neat handwriting, Eli Sanderson, private log, do not read. I read it. Eli's entries started normal enough. Complaints about the cold, observations about staff, notes on bus maintenance. But around page 15, the tone shifted. The passengers on the 1140 from Fairbanks didn't blink, not once during the entire drive to housing. I watched in the mirror. 8 people. No one blinked. When I asked if everyone was comfortable, they answered in unison, "Yes, thank you." Same words, same inflection, like a recording. Found out why we never service Hangar B, checked the manifests. Nothing's been stored there since 1991. But I drove someone there last week. Rule 2. They said the exact words and I took them there and I didn't watch them exit like I was told. The hangar was dark. I heard footsteps inside, lots of them, more than one person could make. They echoed wrong. The radio played something last night, not a lullaby exactly, more like a child's voice singing without words. I kept my hands on the wheel. I didn't look in the mirror, but I heard breathing behind me, slow, patient, like something was leaning forward to see what I'd do. The handwriting got shakier as the entries continued. Words crossed out, rewritten, sometimes just fragments. The airport is a mouth. They built it on top of something. The lights keep it sleeping, but not all the way. Count the passengers, Cone T. Then new rules in Eli's handwriting, rules that weren't on Mara's laminated card. If the fog rolls in fast, I mean fast, like a wall. You have 9 minutes before the road stops leading where it should. Turn around immediately. Count the passengers every time the bus door closes. If the number changes without anyone boarding, do not acknowledge it. Do not ask who's new, just drive. If you smell smoke but see no fire, the runway is burning again. Do not drive toward it. Park and wait until the smell clears. The final entry was dated February 3rd, 3 years ago. I don't think I'm leaving. I tried to quit. Mara accepted my resignation. But when I got to the airport, in Fairbanks for my flight home, I was still in Cascac. Just appeared there, the terminal, the bus, like I never left. I think the airport decides when you're done. I think it keeps what it wants. If someone finds this, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I should have warned. The entry ended mid-sentence. The rest of the page was blank. I checked the employment records. Eli Sanderson's file showed a start date of August 2019 and an end date of February 2020, marked voluntary separation, relocated. But there were no forwarding addresses, no exit interview, no final paycheck documentation. I sat in the empty office, holding Eli's notebook, feeling the weight of those crossed-out words, those fragmentary warnings. The heating system clicked and hummed. Outside the window, the runway stretched away toward the mountains, and even in daylight, the lights burned with that too bright quality, pushing back against something I couldn't see. I started noticing the airport's rhythm after that. The way planes arrived on schedule. The 6:15 from Anchorage, the 11:40 from Fairbanks, the unmarked cargo flights at 2:30 a.m. But sometimes the manifest didn't match the passengers. I'd count 8 people deplaning, but only 6 would appear in the terminal. Or 12 would appear, but the manifest listed 9. Sometimes I'd see the same plane land twice. Same tail number, same flight pattern, landing 20 minutes after it had already landed, like a loop, like time skipping. No one else seemed to notice, or if they did, they'd learned not to mention it. I started carrying Eli's notebook with me, tucked inside my jacket. I added my own observations. Runway lights blink left, right, left approximately twice per week, always between 2 to 4 a.m. Pattern lasts 8 to 12 minutes. Interior lights must be off. Learned this the easy way. Followed the rule immediately. The tree line between marker 2 and marker 5 shows movement most nights. Pacing, watching. Sometimes multiple figures. They don't cross onto the road. There's a boundary they respect. Passengers without luggage have appeared 4 times. 3 said the exact phrase from Rule 2. 1 said something different. I've been waiting. I didn't know what to do. I took them to Hangar B anyway. They exited without sound. The bus smelled like ozone afterward. The notebook became my anchor, proof I wasn't losing my mind, that the impossible things were really happening. On my 16th night, I found another piece of the puzzle. The terminal had a small historical display in the main corridor. Photos of the construction, the ribbon cutting, and the first commercial flight. Mostly it was ignored, just old pictures gathering dust. But I stopped to look at the construction photos, really look. They'd broken ground in March 1987. The photos showed bulldozers, excavators, and crews in hard hats working the frozen ground. One photo showed the foundation dig for the main runway, a massive trench cut through permafrost. At the bottom of the trench, clearly visible even in the faded photograph, was something smooth and black. The workers were gathered around it, and their postures, even in a still image, radiated uncertainty. It was too regular to be natural, too dark to be stone, and one worker had his hand pressed against it, palm flat, like he was feeling for warmth. The caption read, "Unexpected bedrock encounter, March 1987, work continued following the geological survey." I stared at that smooth black surface, at the workers who had touched it, at the date almost 40 years ago. What happened to those workers? What did they wake up when they dug into that? I took a photo of the display with my phone, then went to find Mara. She was in the cargo office signing paperwork by hand because the computer system was acting up again. A phrase I'd heard at least once per shift. "I need to talk to you about the rules," I said. "You're following them. That's all that matters." "Trent, I don't know anyone by that name." Her pen didn't stop moving. "Mara, he disappeared right in front of me. One second he was running to the cabin, the next he was just gone. And everyone's pretending he never existed." She set down the pen, looked at me with those exhausted eyes. "People quit, Noah. They get spooked. They leave in the middle of the night and they don't say goodbye. Happens all the time. His boots are gone. Then he left wearing them. His name is gone from the roster, from everything." Mara was quiet for a long moment. Outside, a plane landed, the evening flight from Anchorage right on time. Through the window, I could see passengers deplaning, normal people doing normal things. "How much do you want to know?" Mara asked finally. "All of it." "No, you don't." She stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the runway. The airport was built on land the locals warned against. The development company ignored them, called it superstition. During the expansion in '91, the crew dug into the permafrost for the new cargo facilities and hit something. Not rock, something else. Something smooth and black and warm. Warm in the middle of frozen ground. She paused and I didn't interrupt. After that, things started happening. Small things at first. Equipment malfunctions. People see movement in their peripheral vision. Then bigger things. A maintenance worker vanished between the parking lot and the terminal, 50 yards in broad daylight. A pilot reported seeing the runway doubled like a mirror image and nearly landed on the wrong one. The rules started forming. Not from corporate, not from management, from us. The people who survived, who figured out the patterns. "What is it?" I asked. "What's under the airport?" "I don't know. None of us does, but it's aware. And it has wants. It doesn't take everyone, just the ones who look back. The ones who can't help themselves, the ones who open doors or stop in wrong places or look in mirrors when they shouldn't." She turned to face me. "Eli Sanderson wrote that notebook you found. He was a good driver, careful. But he tried to leave before it was done with him. And now he's still here somewhere, part of this place. I see him sometimes in reflections, standing where he shouldn't be." My skin went cold. "You see him?" "I see lots of people who didn't make it. They're part of the airport now, part of what it is." "Mara, we need to survive," she interrupted. "That's all. Follow the rules. Don't look back. And when your contract ends, when it actually lets you go, you leave and you never come back. And you never talk about this place." She handed me a piece of paper, a new rule, handwritten. "This one's from me to you. It doesn't want everyone. It wants the ones who look back." I took the paper. "How do I know when it's done with me?" "You'll know. You'll feel it, like weightlifting." She returned to her desk. "Your shift starts in an hour, go get ready." I left her office and walked through the terminal, past the historical photos, past the bulletin boards with their shadow rectangles, past the windows that reflected clouds in doubled images. In the bathroom mirror, I looked at myself and wondered if I was already being watched, already chosen, already part of whatever lived beneath the two bright lights. 3 weeks into the job, I experienced my first fog event. It started normally, a cargo flight at 2:15 a.m., routine pickup, loading crew efficient and silent in the cold. I'd parked the shuttle near Hangar C, engine running, watching them work. The night was clear, stars visible between shreds of cloud, temperature holding at 18 below. Then the fog came, not gradually, not creeping. It rolled over the eastern tree line like a physical thing, a gray wall 50 feet high, moving faster than any natural weather should move. I watched it engulf the forest, swallow the access road, race across the tarmac toward the hangars. Eli's note flashed in my mind. "If the fog rolls in fast like a wall, you have 9 minutes before the road stops leading where it should." 9 minutes. I checked my watch. 2:31 a.m. "We need to go," I shouted to the loading crew. They looked up, saw the fog, and abandoned their work immediately. No questions, no hesitation. They knew. Everyone piled into the shuttle. 4 crew members, no passenger count needed. I threw the bus in gear and accelerated toward the access road, racing the fog wall. It was maybe 200 yards behind us, close enough that I could see it in the mirrors, a churning mass that looked somehow solid, like concrete given vapor. The access road unwound ahead. I pushed the bus to 50, 60, the engine whining. Behind us, the fog gained. Faster, someone whispered. I was trying. The bus wasn't built for speed, and the icy road made anything over 60 suicidal. But the fog didn't care about physics. It rolled forward with perfect consistency, and at 2:34, 3 minutes in, it reached us. The world went gray. Visibility dropped to maybe 15 feet. The headlights barely penetrated, reflecting in a white glare. I eased off the accelerator, trying to keep the road in view, following the reflective markers that appeared and vanished in the murk. Then I noticed the markers were wrong. They'd been on the right side of the road. Now they were on the left, then both sides. Then scattered randomly in the fog, glowing eyes in every direction. "Don't stop," a woman behind me said, Anna from the tower crew. "Whatever you do, don't stop." I kept driving, but I had no idea if I was still on the road. The surface felt right, paved, smooth, but it was curving in ways it shouldn't. The access road was straight. This curved left, then right, then descended at an angle that made my stomach drop. I checked my watch. 2:37. 6 minutes gone. Through the fog, shapes moved. Human-sized, walking alongside the bus, matching our speed perfectly. I couldn't make out details, just darker patches in the gray, staying parallel, never approaching. "Don't look at them," Anna said quietly. "Just drive." The road straightened. The markers reappeared on the right side now, where they belonged. The fog thinned slightly, and I saw something ahead. Lights. The terminal lights burning too bright, pushing back the gray. At 2:39, 8 minutes in, we broke through. The fog stopped at an invisible boundary, unable or unwilling to cross onto the terminal grounds. Behind us, it churned and roiled like a living thing. But ahead, the night was clear and cold and normal. I pulled into the employee lot and put the bus in park. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the wheel to steady them. The crew filed out silently. Anna paused at the door. "That was close," she said. 30 more seconds and we would have been on a different road, one that doesn't come back." "Where does it lead?" She looked at me with ancient weariness. "Nowhere you want to go." After that, I started tracking the fog events. They happened every 8 to 12 days, always at night, always that same unnatural speed. Other staff members knew the signs. The air would smell different right before, like ozone and wet earth. When someone called out, "Fog incoming," everyone moved. No debates, no delays. I asked Luis about it once during a day shift coffee break. "Where does the road go? The other road in the fog?" He stirred his coffee, thinking. "My theory? Nowhere. Everywhere. I think the fog is when this place gets hungry, when it reaches out. The road in the fog doesn't lead anywhere because it's not really a road, it's a mouth." "That's cheerful." "You asked." He sipped his coffee. "I've been here 4 years. I've learned not to ask too many questions. The airport doesn't like curiosity." But I couldn't stop being curious. I needed to understand, to find the pattern, to make sense of the senseless. I went back to Mara's office on a gray Tuesday afternoon, during the dead hours when most staff were sleeping. I brought Eli's notebook. "I need you to tell me everything," I said, setting the notebook on her desk. "Not fragments, everything." Mara looked at the notebook, then at me. Something shifted in her expression. Resignation, maybe, or recognition. "Close the door." I did. She opened a locked desk drawer and pulled out a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. Poured generously. Slid one to me. "You've survived a month," she said. "That's longer than most, longer than I expected, honestly. Thanks for the vote of confidence." "I'm serious. The airport decides quickly, first week usually, whether it wants you or not, whether you're going to follow the rules or fight them." She drank. You follow them, you don't question, you don't test. That's rare. Trent tested. And now there's no Trent. She refilled her glass. The airport was built on a mistake. I told you about the construction and what they found. What I didn't tell you is what happened to the crew that found it. 6 men. They all touched it, that smooth black surface. Felt how warm it was. One of them, his name was Dale Pritchett. He said it felt like it was breathing. What happened to them? Over the next 3 months, they all died, different ways. Accidents, heart attacks, one just disappeared, but before they died, they all reported the same thing. Dreams of flying, of being inside something vast, of lights that burned too bright. I thought of the runway lights, their aggressive luminance. The company buried the reports, Mara continued, wrote it off as bad luck. But the locals knew. They stopped applying for jobs here. The only people who work at Cascak now are people like us. People running from something. People desperate enough not to ask questions. People the outside world doesn't miss. Why do you stay? She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her whiskey. I tried to leave 5 years ago. Got all the way to Seattle. Had an apartment lined up, new job, everything. But I kept dreaming about this place every night. The runway lights, the fog. And in the dreams I could feel it pulling me back like a hook in my sternum. After 3 weeks I couldn't take it anymore. I came back. And the dream stopped immediately. She met my eyes. I think it marks us, Noah. Everyone who works here long enough. We become part of its pattern, its territory. It lets some people go, the ones who stay on the surface, who drive the routes and follow the rules and never look deeper. But the ones who see it, really see it, who touch the edges of what it is, we don't get to leave. I felt cold despite the overheated office. Am I already marked? Probably. You found Eli's notebook, you're asking questions, you're trying to understand instead of just surviving. She smiled sadly. Same as I did. Same as Eli did. So what do I do? You survive, you follow the rules, and you hope that when your contract ends, you're one of the lucky ones that lets go. She stood and walked to the window. There's something else you need to know. The rules aren't static, they evolve. As the airport grows, as more people come and go, it learns new ways to test us, new ways to feed. Feed on what? Attention, fear. The moment when you look back when you shouldn't, when you open a door, when you stop in the forbidden space, it feeds on those moments of weakness, of human curiosity. That's when it takes you. She turned to face me. So the final rule, the one I'm giving you now, don't look back. Not metaphorically, literally, when you're driving away from something wrong, when you hear something behind you, when every instinct says to check the mirror or turn around. Don't. The airport wants you to look. It arranges things specifically to make you look. Resist that urge and you might survive. I took Eli's notebook from her desk. And if I can't resist, then you'll end up like Eli, still here, still driving. But not really you anymore. Just an echo the airport uses to warn the next person. I left her office with the whiskey burning in my stomach and a new weight in my chest. Outside, a plane was landing, the evening flight right on time. Passengers deplaning, luggage cart rolling, everything normal. But now I knew the truth. Nothing here was normal. This entire place was a facade. A thin layer of routine painted over something vast and hungry and patient. As I walked to the shuttle bus for my evening shift, I saw Mara through her office window. She was standing very still, staring at something I couldn't see, and her lips were moving. She was counting. Later, I'd learned she counted everything. Passengers, planes, hours. It was how she stayed sane, how she held on to herself. I understood. I'd started counting too. The lullaby started at 3:47 a.m. on a Thursday night in late November. I was driving the routine housing run, the bus empty, my mind half occupied with planning my next off-day supply run to Fairbanks. The terminal radio sat silent in its dashboard cradle. It usually only crackled during weather updates or the rare emergency call. Then music drifted from the speaker. Soft, old-fashioned. A woman's voice humming a melody without words. The kind of tune that feels familiar even when you've never heard it before. The sound quality was strange. Too clear, too intimate. Like the singer was in the bus rather than transmitted through radio waves. My mother used to hum this song. The recognition hit me like cold water. She'd hummed it when I was sick as a child, sitting beside my bed during fevered nights, her hand cool on my forehead. The melody was woven through my earliest memories, comfort and safety and the sense of being protected. But my mother had been dead for 6 years. Rule 5 flashed in my mind. If the terminal radio starts playing a lullaby, park the bus, keep both hands on the wheel, and do not look into the rearview mirror. I pulled into the designated turnout, a small paved area used for emergency stops. Put the bus in park. Gripped the steering wheel at 10 and 2, knuckles white. The lullaby continued, and now I could hear words underneath the humming. Not English, maybe not any language. But they pulled at something deep in my brain, triggering memories that felt too specific, too perfect. My childhood bedroom, the blue wallpaper with stars, the way the afternoon light came through the window. The smell of my mother's lavender soap. Things I hadn't thought about in years. The rearview mirror seemed darker than it should be. Not reflecting the empty seats behind me, but holding a different kind of darkness. Thicker, more present. Like the mirror wasn't showing the bus interior, but opening onto somewhere else entirely. I kept my eyes forward. "Noah?" The voice came from the back of the bus, soft, questioning, familiar. It sounded like Trent. No, it sounded like my brother Marcus. The brother who died when I was 14, drowned in a lake during a family camping trip while I was supposed to be watching him. "Noah, please." The voice cracked with desperation. "I'm cold. I'm so cold. Why won't you look at me?" My hands trembled on the wheel. Every instinct, every decent human impulse screamed to turn around. Someone was in pain. Someone needed help. Someone was suffering in the cold. "I can't breathe," the voice whispered. "It's so dark back here. Please, please look at me. I just need you to see me." Tears blurred my vision. Because I recognized that tone, the exact pitch Marcus had used when he was scared, when he'd had nightmares and come to my room. The way he'd said my name like I could fix anything. But Marcus was dead. And Rule 5 said, do not look in the rearview mirror. "Noah, I'm scared." The voice was crying now. "I don't know where I am. I think I'm stuck. I can't get out. Why won't you help me? You always helped me before. Remember when..." It described a specific memory. The time I'd found Marcus in the woods behind our house after he'd wandered off chasing a stray dog. How I'd carried him home on my shoulders. The exact words he'd said, "I knew you'd find me." The memory was perfect, too perfect. "Please just turn around, just look, just see me one time and then I can leave, I can go home, I just need someone to see me." My throat was tight. The logical part of my brain knew this was wrong, knew Marcus was gone, knew this was the airport using my grief against me. But the emotional part, the part that still carried guilt like a stone, that part wanted desperately to believe. The lullaby swelled. The humming grew louder, and underneath it I heard breathing. Slow, deliberate. The sound of something patient, something that had waited a long time and could wait longer. In my peripheral vision, the rearview mirror darkened further. Something was moving back there, a shape resolving from the deeper darkness. Small, child-sized. "Noah, I'm right behind you. I'm right here. Just look, just... I closed my eyes, gripped the wheel so hard my hands went numb, and I started counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. Using Mara's technique, using numbers to anchor myself to something concrete, something real. 27, 28, 29. The voice changed, became desperate, angry. Look at me, I'm your brother. How can you ignore me? How can you just sit there while I'm trapped? 53, 54, 55. The breathing grew louder, hot. I could feel it on the back of my neck despite the distance, despite the impossibility. You let me die once. You're letting me die again. What kind of person are you? What kind of brother? 81, 82, 83. The lullaby cut off mid-note. The radio went silent. The breathing stopped. I opened my eyes, still staring forward. The dashboard clock read 3:59. 12 minutes had passed. Slowly, carefully, I checked the side mirrors, not the rear view. The road behind was empty. The night was clear. Nothing moved in the tree line. I put the bus in gear and drove back to the terminal, keeping my eyes forward the entire time, ignoring the sensation that something was watching me from the back seats, breathing quietly, waiting for me to turn around. At the terminal, I parked and exited without looking back. Walked directly to the bathroom and locked myself in a stall, hands shaking so badly I could barely work the lock. I'd passed the test. I'd followed the rule, but I'd heard my brother's voice, heard him beg, heard him cry, and I'd done nothing. The guilt felt like drowning, like I was back at that lake watching Marcus slip under the surface, too far away to reach. My teenage legs pumping through the water, but never fast enough. I sat on the floor of the bathroom stall and cried for the first time in years. When I finally emerged, Luis was waiting in the hallway. He looked at my face and knew immediately. "Rule 5?" he asked quietly. I nodded. What did it sound like? My brother. It sounded exactly like my brother. Luis's expression softened with understanding and pity. It always knows what voice to use. It's been watching you since you got here, learning you, finding the right hook. How did you... Mine was my daughter. She's not dead. She's alive and well in Phoenix, but the voice sounded like her at age 6, when she was small enough to believe I could protect her from anything. He handed me a cup of water from the cooler. The airport doesn't just feed on fear, it feeds on love, on the instinct to help. It uses our best impulses against us. I almost looked. But you didn't. He gripped my shoulder. That's what matters. You followed the rule when every part of you wanted to break it. That's survival. But it didn't feel like survival. It felt like failure, like I'd abandoned someone who needed me. I went back to my cabin and didn't sleep. Just lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the voice over and over. Wondering if Marcus, the real Marcus, wherever he was, would forgive me. Wondering if I'd become the kind of person who could ignore suffering to save himself. The next night, I almost didn't come in for my shift. I stood in my cabin, keys in hand, staring at the door. I could quit. I could walk away, take the financial hit, deal with the consequences, just leave. But Mara's words echoed. I tried to leave. I came back. And I realized I couldn't quit, not because of money or contracts or practical concerns. Because I needed to know, needed to understand what this place was, what it wanted. Why did these things happen? The airport had hooked me. Not with fear, with curiosity, with the fundamental human need to comprehend, to solve the puzzle, to see behind the curtain. It had me exactly where it wanted me. I went to my shift, and from that night forward, I knew I wouldn't leave until the airport decided I could. The medevac call came at 2:13 a.m. on December 9th, cutting through the routine of a quiet shift. The terminal radio crackled. All staff, emergency medical flight inbound, ETA 6 minutes. Shuttle required for passenger transport to the terminal. Acknowledge. I was near Hangar C, finishing a cargo run. Shuttle driver acknowledged. En route to runway access. The weather had been clear all night, but as I turned onto the access road, I saw the fog. Not rolling in this time. It was already there, hanging in discrete patches between the trees like something waiting. The air smelled wrong. Ozone and wet earth and something underneath. Something organic and old. Then the runway lights began to blink. Left, right, left. Left, right, left. Rule 3. If you see runway lights blinking in an alternating pattern, left, right, left, turn the bus interior lights off and keep driving. I killed the interior lights immediately. The bus plunged into darkness, broken only by the dashboard glow and headlights. Outside, the runway lights continued their pattern, a rhythmic pulse that felt almost hypnotic. The fog thickened as I approached the runway. Not fast-moving like the wall events, but seeping, accumulating, until visibility dropped to maybe 20 feet. The access road looked different, wider than I remembered, the pavement darker, as if I were driving on a surface that had never seen sunlight. At the 3rd mile marker, I saw them, people standing in the snow lined up along the road's edge facing me. 8, 10, maybe a dozen. They stood perfectly still, no visible breath clouding the air, their faces pale and smooth in the headlights. No luggage, no gear, just standing, waiting. The terminal radio crackled again, but the voice was wrong, too calm, too measured, like a recording trying to mimic human inflection. Shuttle driver, stop and load passengers. I didn't stop. I kept driving, hands rigid on the wheel, watching the figures in my peripheral vision. As I passed, they turned to follow the bus's progress, smooth, synchronized, like animatronics on a track. None of them moved toward the road, they just watched. The fog grew denser. The headlights barely penetrated now, reflecting in a white wall. I was navigating by memory and the occasional glimpse of the road's edge, praying I was still on the access road and not somewhere else. The medevac plane appeared through the fog like a ghost, a small twin-engine aircraft sitting on the taxiway, running lights blinking. The fog swirled around it but didn't seem to touch it, as if the plane existed in a slightly different space. 2 figures stood beside it, paramedics in high-visibility vests. Between them, a covered stretcher. I pulled up and opened the door. The paramedics loaded the stretcher first, mechanically and efficiently, then they boarded. I counted 1, 2. 2 paramedics. A 3rd person stepped from the fog, then a 4th. They boarded without speaking, moving to the back seats. I heard the rustle of fabric, the creak of seat springs when I glanced in the side mirror. Not the rear view, never the rear view. I saw shapes in the darkness. Too many shapes. I was counting silently. 3, 4, 5. The door was still open. Fog spilled in, carrying that copper and rot smell. A 5th passenger appeared at the door. This one looked different, translucent at the edges, like a photograph overlaid on reality. It climbed the steps slowly, and as it passed into the bus, it whispered, "I missed the last flight." Rule 2. My stomach dropped. I couldn't see the passenger clearly in the dark bus, but I heard it settle into a seat with a sound like wind through hollow spaces. 6 passengers for a medevac that should have had 3 at most. "Proceed to the terminal," one of the paramedics said, but the voice had that same wrong quality as the radio, too measured, missing the tiny imperfections of human speech. I closed the door and drove. The interior was dark, but I could sense them back there. Too many passengers. Their presence was heavy, oppressive, like the air pressure had increased. I heard breathing, multiple sources, none of it quite synchronized, none of it quite right. "Excuse me," a voice said from the back. Polite, questioning. "Are we almost there?" I didn't answer. "Driver?" Another voice. "I asked you a question." Rule 2 said take them to Hangar B. But the paramedic had said terminal. Which did I follow? The bus shuddered, not from the road, from beneath that same sensation I'd felt when I'd passed the figure at the third marker all those weeks ago. Something is brushing the undercarriage. He's not answering us, a third voice said. That's rude. Maybe he can't hear us. Or maybe he's being deliberately difficult. The voices overlapped now, a chorus of two polite passengers discussing me like I wasn't there. In the side mirror, I saw movement, shapes shifting, something tall unfolding from a seat that should have been too small. I think we should go to Hangar B, one of the original voices said, the one that had whispered the trigger phrase. That decided it. I turned off the route to the terminal, heading instead toward the cargo facilities, toward Hangar B, the place no one mentioned. The building I'd been told held nothing but had footsteps inside. The other passengers went silent. In the darkness behind me, something tapped the window. Once, twice. A polite knock, like someone asking permission to exit. Don't stop, I whispered to myself. Don't stop, don't look back. The tapping increased. Multiple sources now, windows on both sides. The rhythm was deliberate, communicative, like Morse code spelling out a message I couldn't read. Hangar B appeared through the fog, a massive structure, doors closed, no lights. I pulled up to the entrance and stopped. Last stop, I said, voice shaking. Hangar B. The passengers stood. I heard them moving down the aisle, felt them pass by my seat, so close I could have reached out and touched them. The air grew colder with each one. 5 passengers exited. I didn't watch them leave. I kept my eyes forward, fixed on the hangar doors. But I heard them. Footsteps on pavement that became footsteps on dirt, that became footsteps on nothing, fading into a distance that shouldn't exist in the few feet between the bus and the building. The smell of wet iron filled the bus. Old Penny's blood. Something tapped my window right beside my face, inches away. Tap, tap, tap. My eyes wanted to turn. Every instinct demanded I look, identify the threat, and assess the danger. I stared straight ahead. The tapping moved, up the window, across the roof, the sound of something walking on top of the bus, weight shifting the suspension. Then silence. I waited 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. Finally, I checked the side mirror. The area around the bus was empty. The fog had lifted slightly. Hangar B's doors were closed, no sign of entry, but I could swear I heard something from inside. Not footsteps this time, but breathing. Massive, slow, like a sleeping giant. I put the bus in gear and drove back to the terminal. The 2 paramedics were still in their seats. Real paramedics this time. I could see them clearly in the dashboard light, normal humans with tired faces and medical patches on their shoulders. Thanks for the ride, one said as they prepared to unload the stretcher. Rough night. They had no memory of the extra passengers, no awareness that anything unusual had happened. I helped them with the stretcher, then watched them disappear into the terminal. The bus was empty now, but it smelled like ozone and iron, and when I checked the passenger area, I found frost on the windows. Not outside, inside. Frost patterns that looked almost like handprints, except the fingers were too long and there were too many of them. I cleaned them off before anyone could see. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. I went through the motions, made my rounds, followed the routes. But something had changed. I could feel it in my chest, in the way my hands moved, in the mechanical precision of my thoughts. I'd crossed a threshold. I'd taken them to Hangar B. I'd followed the rule even when other passengers were present, even when logic and responsibility suggested otherwise. The airport had tested me, and I'd chosen obedience over reason. I'd chosen survival over humanity. And I knew, with the certainty of someone who's lost something irretrievable, that I was never leaving this place. Dawn came at 9:47 a.m. in early December, the sun barely clearing the mountains before beginning its descent again. I finished my shift in that gray twilight, moving through the post-shift routine with mechanical precision. Park the bus, complete the log, check for damage, return the keys. My handwriting in the log was different now, neater, more controlled, like someone else was guiding my hand. Mara was in her office when I dropped off the keys. She looked at me, really looked, and something passed across her face. Recognition, resignation, grief. "You took them to Hangar B," she said, not a question. "Yes." "How many were there?" "6, maybe 7, I stopped counting." She nodded slowly. "And you didn't look back?" "No." "Then you survived." She took the keys and set them in the drawer. "But you know you're different now." I did know. I could feel it. A subtle shift in how I perceived the airport. The terminal no longer felt threatening. The fog was just weather. The rules weren't restrictions but tools, natural and necessary as breathing. I'd stopped fighting, stopped questioning. I'd become part of the pattern. Over the following weeks, I noticed changes in my behavior. I started arriving early for shifts, checking the bus before anyone asked, maintaining systems I'd never been trained on. I developed a sense for the airport's rhythms, could predict fog events hours in advance, knew when planes would be delayed before the tower announced it, felt disturbances in the routine like a change in air pressure. I caught myself humming sometimes. The lullaby from Rule 5. Other staff members treated me differently, with a kind of cautious respect, the way you'd treat someone who'd been initiated into a secret society. Luis nodded to me more often. Anna from the tower started saving me a seat in the break room. Even Mara softened slightly, though the exhaustion in her eyes never faded. "You're adapting well," she said one afternoon, approving my request to extend my contract through spring. "Thank you. Most people don't make it this far. The ones who do." She trailed off, staring past me at something I couldn't see. "The ones who do become essential. The airport keeps us because we understand it, because we can help maintain the balance." Balance? Between what it is and what it pretends to be. She handed me a new laminated card. "You'll need this. More rules. As you work here longer, you become privy to deeper protocols." The new card had rules I'd never seen. If you encounter yourself driving the opposite direction, do not make eye contact. You are experiencing a loop. Continue your route exactly as planned. Passengers who board at Gate 7 are not returning from anywhere. Treat them with courtesy, but do not engage in conversation. If the runway appears to have no end, you are seeing it as it truly is. Look away. I read them without surprise, without fear. They made sense in the way the original rules had come to make sense, not logically but intuitively. I started creating my own additions to the rules. Small observations, pattern refinements, and techniques I'd developed for surviving the stranger shifts. I wrote them in a notebook. Not Eli's, but a new one I'd purchased in Fairbanks during a supply run. My handwriting filled the pages in neat, controlled script. Count passengers boarding at night. If the count changes before arrival, the extras will exit at Hangar B regardless of stated destination. Do not acknowledge the discrepancy. The fog respects the terminal boundary. If it crosses onto the grounds, proceed to the underground shelter immediately. This has only happened twice. Both times, staff members disappeared. You will sometimes see planes landing on runways that don't exist. These planes are not in your jurisdiction. Do not approach them. One night in late January, I saw Eli. He was standing near the access road between the 3rd and 4th markers watching the bus approach. I recognized him from an old photo in the employee archive. Thin, bearded, wearing a parka identical to the one I now wore. He didn't wave, didn't gesture, just stood there, observing. I drove past without stopping, without slowing, following Rule 1. In the side mirror, I watched him turn to follow the bus's progress. His movements were smooth, synchronized, exactly like the figures in the fog. Eli was still here, still driving in a sense, just not in any way that mattered to the person he'd been. I reported the sighting to Mara the next day. He appears sometimes, she confirmed, to drivers he approves of. It's not a threat. Think of it as acknowledgement. You're part of the lineage now. That should have terrified me. Instead, I felt honored. I was becoming what I'd feared. In March, a new hire arrived. Tyler Chen, 23, fresh out of college with a useless degree and student debt, looking for quick money and an adventure. I saw him step off the plane, saw the excitement and relief on his face. Saw how he looked at the terminal like it was salvation rather than a trap. Mara assigned me to train him. I took him through the routes, showed him the bus systems, and explained the maintenance protocols. Then I handed him a laminated card. These are the rules, I said. Read them, memorize them, follow them exactly. He read and laughed nervously. Is this a joke? No. Come on, this is like something from a horror movie. Don't stop between markers. Don't look in mirrors. What is this really about? I looked at him with what I knew was the same exhausted patience Mara had shown me months ago. Follow them or you won't make it to spring. He laughed again, but this time it was uncertain. You're serious. Completely. What happens if I don't follow them? I thought of Trent. The figure is sliding sideways, of voices in the darkness, of passengers who weren't passengers. You'll find out, I said, and then you won't be able to tell anyone. I left him with the rules and walked away. Behind me, I heard him call out, "Hey, wait, what do these actually mean?" I didn't answer. He'd learn, or he wouldn't. Either way, the airport would decide. That night, I parked the shuttle in its designated spot after the shift and sat for a moment, engine running, listening to the quiet hum of the diesel. Through the windshield, the runway lights burned too bright against the dark sky. The tree line stood silent and watchful. This place had taken pieces of me, my skepticism, my certainty, my connection to the outside world. It had hollowed me out and filled the empty spaces with itself. But I was alive, functional, part of something larger than myself. Even if that something was incomprehensible and hungry, I'd survived. And survival, I'd learned, was all that mattered. As I exited the bus, I saw Tyler in the distance walking toward the staff housing. He passed between two pools of light, and for a moment, just a moment, his shadow moved independently, stretching toward the tree line like it was reaching for something. He didn't notice, but I did. I made a note in my logbook. New driver, Tyler Chen. Monitor closely. Then I returned to my cabin, made coffee, and prepared for the next shift. Outside, the runway lights blinked their pattern. Left, right, left, left, right, left. And from the darkness beyond the terminal grounds, the tree line waved back. The airport was patient. It had all the time in the world, and so I realized,